I'm diving into the common mistakes people make in rehab that we see so often as physios, and how to make sure you don't fall into these traps. When it comes to rehab, we all want to believe we're doing everything right, that we're on the path to recovery, and that we're one step closer to regaining our health and independence. But the harsh reality is that many of us are making mistakes that can hinder our progress, slow our recovery, and even lead to relapses. That's why it's crucial to acknowledge and address these mistakes head on, and that's exactly what we're going through in this video. I've had injuries, I know exactly what to do, but still have fallen into some of these mistakes. Mistake 1 is all about load management. When you have an injury, the tolerance to loading of that area has reduced. Go over that tolerance and you'll get pain. It's really hard at the start of a rehab journey to know where the tolerance level is for a specific issue. What a lot will do at the start is just rest, which is good to an extent, but not the whole time. For the majority of issues, you want to be getting movement and good blood flow to the area. But saying that, you can also do too much the other way. You want to be hitting that Goldilocks zone of activity of just the right level, which will change throughout the journey. The problem with a lot of physio and general therapy is say you have a knee issue. You get given a sheet of exercises and told to do 3 sets of 10 of certain exercises every day. The thing is, that's just an educated guess that it's within the right tolerance for you. And it will be for some people, but for others, it might be too much and makes things worse. They will then be the ones to say they stop completely and that exercise or rehab doesn't work for them. The thing is, it's not that the exercise is bad, it's just that the dosage wasn't right at that time. Maybe it was too hard, maybe it needs slightly less range or slightly less volume, or needing more rest days. Something like 2 sets of 8 3 times a week instead might have been perfect. It's all about establishing a baseline and then building from it. One of the hardest parts, and this is where I've fallen into this trap before with my shoulder, comes when symptoms do settle and then you get excited. It feels good in a session, so you do more. It still feels good. And psychologically, you're so sick of not having done the things you want to be doing, you think all is good, you push too hard, and then it set it back again because you did too much too quickly. Mistake 2 is not tracking. This is because, especially at the start, you have to adjust depending on your response. And we'll explain a really good system to use of how to progress things. And the issue that comes with a lot of conditions is after effects. It feels fine during exercise or rehab, then it can feel worse afterwards. It's similar to this example, which I've had before. Being away, having a sunbathe, and it feels absolutely fine. Thinking, we should get a good tan from this. Then later in the day, looking down and being like, oh, red as can be. It's the same with rehab. You won't necessarily feel it at the time, especially with things like tendons once they've warmed up a bit. But later in the day or the next morning, it's really bad. So you have to be tracking what you've done so you can adjust it accordingly and then use this system. If you have no pain during and no increased pain after, you will progress, but really steadily. If you have no pain during but have increased pain after, but it settles within 24 hours, then just stay where you are. Don't progress, but you shouldn't need to drop back either. If you have pain during, or you have increased pain after that lingers over 24 hours, then regress and make things easier. So you need to track so you can see what you did previously to know how to adjust. So it might be that you did 5 kg and did 3 sets of 12 on it. If you progress in that, you might go to 6 kg and do 3 sets of 8. Or if you need to regress, you'll do 3 sets of 8 or 5 kg or 3 sets of 12 and 4 kg instead. And check the response again. This is why I'm not a fan of using bands specifically, as you can't get specific enough when you might need to. Mistake 3 is one I've fallen into without even realizing. I'd hurt my shoulder previously, had rehabbed it and got it back to where I could hardly notice it anymore. But some days it was still a lot worse than others and I couldn't understand it because my day wasn't that different. It wasn't even on days I did a workout or rehab necessarily. And this is where tracking outside of rehab can also become useful. So I kept an activity diary and I noted down what I'd done and I noticed the correlation. It was always on the days I was traveling between clinics. But again, I couldn't pin down why that would affect it until one day I was getting in my car and it all made sense. I was lifting my bag across to the passenger seat and it was pretty heavy. It had my laptop in, my lunch, and all the stuff I needed in there. And I was then lifting it back over when getting out. And because of changing clinics, I was doing this way more on those days, which was stopping things from getting better. As soon as I changed that, walked around and just put it on the chair with the other hand, all the symptoms cleared up for good. And this is the mistake, not modifying activities in day-to-day life. You might spend 10 minutes on rehab helping it in the day, but if the other 23 plus hours have things that keep hindering and going over the tolerance and you're not adapting accordingly, then you can end up going round in circles. Mistake 4 is something we see all the time on the internet especially. A lot of fancy techniques and exercises that are just used to seem original, but are really unnecessary. What you want to be sticking to are the basics and getting them right, especially with exercise selection, rather than all the wacky stuff that isn't adding anything. Most joints and muscles will do a particular movement or movements, so work on conditioning them back to normal, building tolerance back up gradually. Be patient and taking note of the mistakes already mentioned. For some, there will be different exercises that need adding, especially if returning to sport, but everyone needs to get the basics right first. Don't get caught up in the mistake of overcomplicating the exercises. Mistake 5 is being too specific. Let's say you're a runner, you enjoy the gym and you've hurt your knee, and it's bad enough that you're at the point you can no longer run or train legs. A common issue would be something like a patella tendinopathy. So a tendon issue, and the main load management would be based around exercise involving the quadricep muscle. So you could just focus everything on building the tolerance of the quad loading, which is great, it would help. But now because you're not doing your normal activities, all your other muscles around the leg will be getting weaker and your cardio worse. So you need to make sure you still work all the other muscles around the leg and getting some cardio in that's not going to be irritating symptoms, but keeping that global approach rather than just some exercises off a sheet was focused to the injury. You still need to give attention to everything else as well to minimize overall deconditioning. Mistake 6, this is a really common one and we will explain why it can be negative longer term, and it's relying on passive treatments only. So where something is being done to you, like just having a massage or manipulations or whatever the therapist has studied that weekend or is a current trend in therapy or whatever else. And this has taken a lot of bashing over recent years, with some calling to abandon it altogether. But really it does have a place. It can make things feel better for sure, and people can get better from it. The problem is, if just relying on this, you would have deconditioned a lot of those muscles as you're not actively using them while trying to recover. So then you're more likely to get injured again, and you'll have no idea where the current tolerance level sits. So if everything is feeling pretty good, you then go back to doing your normal things, but now it's just set things off again because that might have been still way beyond its tolerance. Whereas if you've been tracking and building up slowly, adjusting according to your response, you'll know exactly where you are with things. So implement these things by all means, but alongside with rehab, not just solely by itself. Mistake 7 is one of the key ones that always gets overlooked. And it's a lot of the stuff that isn't getting measured, and it's overlooking the other lifestyle, social, and psychological factors that we know can influence improvement to symptoms. The big, simple ones is getting enough sleep. A lot of repair and recovery will happen here. Diet is massive. It's increasing inflammation negatively due to a lot of processed food or not getting enough protein to aid in repair. Being hydrated enough, everything in the body needs this to be working well, especially when trying to heal. Stress is one of the biggest. High cortisol has been shown to reduce healing, while high oxytocin, the love hormone, has been shown to increase healing, and this is where the social side heavily comes in. Smoking and alcohol can have negative impacts on recovery. Then even things like how optimistic you are about recovery can have an effect. These are all things we can't ignore anymore and that needs consideration for recovery. If you need a plan with levels of exercises to work through, we have videos on pretty much all the major conditions on our channel. Or we also have rehab blueprints with all the extra information you can buy for less than a consultation would be, but is the equivalent value of having multiple visits. The link is in the description.